So this is a big news item that is breaking this week regarding Bethany Christian Services. This is a well-known evangelical adoption agency. I've known about them for quite a while. My family has adopted a child, not through Bethany Christian Services. We actually adopted through different means. But still, this is something that we care about, that's been on our radar as a family. And now the report is that Bethany Christian Services says they will help LGBTQ families adopt children. I think this is really something we're going to have to talk about and think through as Christians. These are the kinds of things happening in our culture right now, the shifts that are taking place in people's viewpoints. I think about Max Lucado recently, who apologized for a sermon that he gave back in 2004 regarding same-sex marriage. And now he's saying that Christians who are faithful have different views on things like this. And so obviously the times have shifted, the culture has shifted, and it's really causing a lot of grappling with issues like this. And so now we see evidence of that with Bethany Christian Services actually changing their position. This article says, Michigan-based Bethany Christian Services announced Monday it will begin placing children in LGBTQ families nationwide. Bethany, one of the country's largest adoption and foster care agencies, started offering services to gay couples in 2019 after a legal settlement. So that shows you that a lot of these things really are pressure issues. It's not necessarily that an organization on their own wants to go in a direction. It's that when the culture goes in a certain direction, pressure is placed on organizations, and there can even be legal consequences for positions that organizations like this hold. The company has assisted with 3,406 foster placements and 1,123 adoptions in 2019 and provides services in 32 states. The new policy approved by the organization's board does not include the phrase LGBTQ, but says it will implement a nationwide policy of inclusivity in order to serve all families across Bethany's core service lines. They do have a link in this article to that policy. It's right here, and I will leave a link to this policy in the video description so that you can read it in full for yourself. So it doesn't specifically mention LGBTQ families, but it does talk about being inclusive. So they're really implying here that's what they are talking about, and that is what's being reported in the news outlets. The international agency will begin training all its employees, including those at locations that have not worked with gay couples. CBN News received the following emailed statement from Bethany. For the past 75 years, Bethany Christian Services has never wavered from our mission of demonstrating the love and compassion of Jesus to children and families. We help families stay together, we reunify families who are separated, and we help vulnerable children find safe, stable homes when they cannot remain in their own. Faith in Jesus is at the core of our mission, but we are not claiming a position on the various doctrinal issues about which Christians of mutual good faith may disagree. That statement, by the way, sounds a lot like what Max Lucado said recently. Going on, it says, we acknowledge that discussions about doctrine are important, but our sole job is to determine if a family can provide a safe, stable environment for children. Unlike many other child and family welfare organizations, Bethany is committed to partnering with churches to find as many families for vulnerable children as possible, and we seek to place children with families that share our mission. So this is a very interesting statement. First of all, they are saying that they don't want to take a particular doctrinal stand. They think Christians can have different views on the LGBT issues. But also they're saying that they work with churches. So you can read that in different ways. I take that to mean that as they're working with different churches, they are going to place children in families that are going to those churches. And some of those people may be LGBTQ families. Therefore, if they're still involved in a church, they call themselves Christians, Bethany Christian Services is going to work with those people. It could also be taken to mean, though, that in general, a lot of these families are still going to be traditional nuclear families with a male father, female mother, because a lot of people in churches fit that category. But obviously there's a shift taking place here, and this statement reflects that. Going on, it says, "For us to carry out our mission, we are building a broad coalition of Christians, finding families and resources for children in the greatest need. The people we serve deserve to know they are worthy of being safe, loved, and connected. The need is great, so we are taking an all-hands-on-deck approach. We believe that Christians with diverse beliefs can unify around our mission of demonstrating the love and compassion of Jesus. It's an ambitious mission, and we can only accomplish it together." So as our culture is changing, these are the kinds of things that we have to think about. These are the kinds of issues we're dealing with more and more. And one of the questions that does come up from a practical standpoint that I understand where an adoption agency like this is coming from is it better for a child to be in no family or to be in an abusive situation rather than to be in a safe situation, even if that safe situation is a same-sex couple? Wouldn't it be better for a child to be in that safe situation? And in our culture, that is a legitimate question now. Those are becoming more and more real kinds of situations that we're dealing with. There might be a situation where a child has no other place to go that is safe other than a same-sex couple household. And so I think that's where they're coming from with this partly, but I also think they're coming at it from a legal standpoint. Interestingly, I was reading another article kind of related to that legal question, and it says in this New York Times article that Russell Moore says, "I am disappointed in this decision, as are many. This move," he says, "will harm already existing efforts to enable faith-based orphan care ministries to serve the vulnerable without capitulating on core Christian convictions," he added, referring to litigation like the case in Philadelphia. But it sounds like Russell Moore is saying there that the stand that Bethany Christian Services is taking, or the position that they're taking, is actually capitulating, and it's going to actually create potential legal problems or reinforce legal problems in the future for other agencies that are faith-based. So it sounds like he's taking issue with the position that Bethany Christian Services is taking. So there is a legal standpoint, and what I have to say in all of this is that we definitely had a fundamental change in our culture when several years ago the Supreme Court acted to basically legalize same-sex marriage. And obviously the Supreme Court didn't make all of those cultural changes happen. The cultural changes are what set things up for the court to make the decision that it made in that Supreme Court case. So what that marked, though, when the Supreme Court said that same-sex marriage is legal, is that really marked that our culture had shifted. And I think it really was a signal that as a society, we no longer look at marriage in a traditional biblical way. We don't have the Christian view of marriage anymore as a culture. I know some people are trying to redefine the idea of what a Christian marriage is, but if you look at the Bible and what Jesus says, for example, and what Christians have believed for many, 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 many years, millennia, it's that marriage is between a man and a woman. God created them male and female and said that the two shall become one flesh. And what God has put together, let no one separate. That's what Jesus said. So that has been the historic view of marriage, and it's really a Christian-based view of marriage. Obviously, there were other cultures before Jesus' time and at Jesus' time that had a different view of marriage. But Jesus' view of marriage was very restrictive, if you will, or it was very defined. It was this idea that you were with one person and you were committed to them for life. Well, anyway, our culture has held to that view of marriage for a long time. But what happened with the Supreme Court really showed a shift that had taken place in our culture's thinking. As a result, our society doesn't operate in this Christian view of marriage anymore, and it's forcing agencies like this and situations like this where we as Christians have to think about how are we going to live in a society that doesn't hold to our view of the world and our view of marriage anymore. So it brings up these practical questions. It also brings up legal questions. If Bethany Christian Services doesn't take this position, then not only can they lose funding if they're being funded by the government, but legal action can be taken against them, and they essentially could lose their ability to function as an organization. And we see this, that businesses sometimes are actually taken down because of a personal conviction that someone has. And this is the kind of thing we're going to be dealing with more and more. It is, in reality, a form of persecution. I know it's not direct persecution, but as Christians, if we're trying to hold to a biblical view of things, and ultimately there are consequences in our society as a result of the views that we hold to, then that leads to pressure and even loss of organizations, maybe loss of our job, our income, and that is a form of persecution. And I think we're going to be dealing with this more and more. I wish personally that Bethany Christian Services, I understand where they're coming from, but I wish they had held their ground and sought to remain biblical in their outlook. And I know that that creates other problems. I know that it sounds hateful to the world around us, but I think there is a loving way to hold to biblical convictions. So those are some of the thoughts that I have on this. I would love to hear what you think in the comments below, but please try to keep those comments constructive and helpful, edifying to others. But these are the kinds of things we're going to really have to think about, work through, and pray about as Christians more and more. So let's continue the discussion. But thank you so much for listening to some of my thoughts brought to you from A Frisch Perspective.